All right, welcome to the Pangburn Philosophy Podcast. This is Travis Pangburn. Today I'm speaking with Yasmine Mohammed. She is a Arab Canadian college instructor, activist, podcaster, and writer who has written a memoir entitled From Al-Qaeda to Atheism. In it, she describes how, even though she was born and raised in North America, she endured the same traumas that are familiar to Muslims across the planet. As a child, she was beaten for not memorizing the Quran. As a teenager, she was forced into marriage to a member of Al-Qaeda after he was bailed out of prison by Osama bin Laden. And as an adult, she wore a niqab and lived in a home prison with paper covering all the windows. How are you, Yasmine?
I'm good now. I'm all good.
Well, this is amazing that you've managed to escape, what seemed like a fate that, it would almost be impossible to escape from. You were forced into marriage. Let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk a bit about like what your state of mind was when all this was happening to you.
So that wasn't the first time I was being forced into a marriage, but I had fought it off previously. The marriage proposals were coming in ever since I was 14 years old. That's when my mom, the first time she sat me down and said, okay, there's this whatever, and I'm like, can I finish high school?
Right. And what did she call it? Did she say it's a custom of our religion? Was that the way she described it?
Oh, well, I always knew that's, ever since you're, 8 or 9 years old, when the hijab is put on me, it's explained to you that that's your purpose. Your purpose is to get married and make babies and grow the ummah, which is the community of Muslims. So you always know that that's your fate.
And is this something you would speak to a lot about with your friends at school, like specifically your girlfriends? Would you talk about like this horror that you were approaching, or was it more like it was kind of normalized and it wasn't this terrifying thing that was going to happen?
Well, I think because we're in the West, 'cause I was born and raised in Canada, so we were, straddling both cultures. Like even though we were, in a secular society, we were going to Islamic schools and we were in a separate bubble, but we could see how other people were living. So we always had a sense that things could be different. Whereas I think if we were in an Islamic country, it would be more normalized, but because we were here, we did fight against it. We did want to have, enjoy our life as much as we could before the fateful day would arrive. Like we knew it would happen eventually, and we just wanted to avoid it for as long as we could. And then just hopefully the person that we end up with would be somebody who was, westernized and not too religious. Really, those were our hopes.
Right. So the man you ended up marrying, he was connected to Osama bin Laden directly, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Wow. And you weren't aware of this obviously until much later on.
Yes. Well, this is pre 9/11, so I didn't know who Osama bin Laden was anyway, but I was contacted by CSIS, who are the Canadian CIA, and they're the ones that told me who I was married to. And when they mentioned bin Laden and Al-Qaeda, like none of these words meant anything to me at the time. It wasn't until 9/11 that it became clear who I was married to. But by then I had already left him.
Right. And what did you think of him when you first met him?
I never liked him. I had a very negative just feeling. He had like this energy about him that made me uncomfortable. He scared me. He's like 6'4", and he was extremely fit when I first met him. Like he was just all muscle and, foreboding. There was just something really scary about him. And also he didn't even speak English. So that was another thing that bothered me. He was 14 years older than me. So there's not like there was just a lot of reasons why we couldn't connect,
Your choice of music was probably very different.
Well, there's no music is haram, so there's no music allowed anyway. At one point during our marriage, I was just looking through the phone book trying to look something up, and I started absentmindedly singing the alphabet to myself to how you kind of, because it's all in alphabetical order. So I started singing the alphabet to myself, and before I knew it, I was slapped across the face because I was bringing the devil into the house by my alphabet.
So the abuse, like you did mention in an interview and probably a few times that you were punched in the face by your husband because he thought that people might have been able to see you through the window in your own home. Is this correct?
Yeah, on the 17th floor. So this was the very first time. So I was kind of, still mouthy because it was the beginning of the marriage. So, he came home and I wasn't wearing a hijab. And like I said, we're a 17th floor apartment. And he started freaking out at me and calling me a whore. And I was like, are you afraid that seagulls or like somebody in a helicopter is going to see me? Like, what is your problem? Calm down. And then that's when that was the first time that he beat me up pretty badly. So, after it's not too long into the marriage after that when you just stop responding. You just accept whatever madness.
Right. You obviously are trying to survive and you don't want to obviously get hurt physically more, so that's going to put you in a position of probably exactly what he wanted and having you shut up, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, he would have such rage. He actually broke his wrist one time from beating me up, and he went and he's getting his wrist taken care of, and he came home and he was like laughing about it. He's like, the doctor asked me, how did you hurt yourself? And I couldn't tell him. It's because I was beating the shit out of you because you deserved it. Ha 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 ha.
So he had a sense of humor about this abuse he was causing.
Yeah, it was very normal for him. It was very normal for me too, because that's how I grew up. It's when I was growing up, I mean, it's a typical story, right? It's all of these things become normalized and familiar. You hope that you're going to end up with somebody different, but if your family that sees you in a particular way, if they're the ones that are choosing your partner for you, then they're obviously going to choose somebody that they value and somebody that would treat you in the same way that they treated you, So it was all just a continuation of my childhood.
Yeah. Did you ever fight back? Did you ever hit him back?
Oh no. Oh no. He was he was extremely fit.
Right.
I can't even describe. Like, it wasn't later in the marriage he softened up, but in the beginning, because he had been in Afghanistan training for so many years. So he was,
You must have fantasized about hurting him, or even, did you ever think about trying to kill him?
To be honest, no, I didn't. I was pretty quickly lost a sense of self. I just became, I didn't even know who I was if he didn't tell me who I was. I just became nothing. And it wasn't until my daughter was born that I wouldn't even say snapped out of it, because it was a very slow, gradual coming out of it. But it surprised me to realize how far deep I was. I really, he really did a number on me. And I think that any person listening right now who has been in an abusive relationship can understand that you just completely lose who you are. I am just his partner. That's it. I live to, I mean, people say you walk on eggshells. I didn't even walk on eggshells. I just stood on eggshells and waited to know which direction to move in, because everything was volatile.
Right. And I assume sex was always like forced upon you. You had no say.
No, women don't have a say in Islam. After he beat me up that first time, and I went to my mom and I said that I didn't want to live with him anymore, and she told me that I had to stay married to him because if he divorced me this early, so women can't divorce, the man has to divorce her. So since it's the man that has to do the divorcing, there's always this social stigma that, you're being thrown away or you're being discarded. The woman is being discarded when there's a divorce. That's how it's seen. And so it's like an embarrassment to the family honor. And so my mom was saying, if he divorces you this early on, then everybody's going to think that he divorced you because you weren't a virgin. So you have to stay married to him for a while longer.
Wow.
So that it's natural. And so I said, well, I'm not letting him near me because I don't want to end up pregnant and then being stuck with him. And then she's like, oh no, you have no choice. He's your husband. He's yours. And if you don't let him whenever he wants to, then the angels are all going to curse you all night till morning. And that's, she would always quote hadith for me. Like, this is the ayah in the Quran. This is why he can beat you up. This is the hadith right here. This is why there's no such thing as marital rape. There was always scripture to support, why I had to listen, why I couldn't argue.
Yeah. Are you still in a relationship with your mother? Or is
No.
she still around? No?
Well, I don't know. I haven't had any contact with her in about 15 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, how can one blame you?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't until she threatened to kill me that I severed ties, but we did have a very difficult relationship for many years, but I still wanted her approval and I wanted her to be proud of me. And I tried for so many years, but it was just like this never ending. I could never do enough to make her happy. I could never do enough to finally satisfy her. So
when and why did she threaten to kill you?
So once I was able to get away from him, and that's a very long, complicated story, which I'll go into detail in my book, but I was able to get away from him, and then I stayed with my mom initially, and then I eventually was able to get away from my mom too. And once I did that, I started to go to university, and all of this is forbidden, right? A girl living by herself. I was with my daughter, but a woman without her husband or her father and taking care of her, basically. You go from your father's house to your husband's house. That's it. A woman that lives alone is a whore, basically. That's it. So I was living alone and I was going to university. So two things that she completely disagreed with, because after I left Assam, she was trying to get me the next man to marry. And I just kept on refusing and saying, nope, not going to fall down that rabbit hole again. So when I was going to university, I took a history of religions course. And in that course, I started to learn about my religion objectively. I had always heard about it from the perspective of, this, it's so divine and this is the perfect word of Allah and et cetera, et cetera. But now I was learning about it from a different perspective. And once you see it from that perspective, it's all just a sham. It just quickly unraveled from that point. And so it took a while, but initially I was very excited and happy that, oh my God, I don't have to believe in this. You mean this isn't real? Like, I was so excited that I didn't have to live like that. But it didn't mean that I just shed it really quickly. It was still a slow transition out of Islam. And one of the first things that I did was take off my hijab. And I had it off sort of part-time. I was living this double life where I had it on during the day, and I, like, when I was in school, and I took it off, at night when I'd go clubbing with my friends. So it was like this, I was going through that period. And then at some point I got sick and tired of it. And I said, I'm tired of this. I just want to live. I just want to be myself full time. And so everybody in my life knew I wasn't wearing a hijab except for my mom. I would still fake it. I'd still put it on when I was seeing her. And one day I just had enough. She'd asked me to drive her to the doctor. And so I said, I'm going to go without a hijab on. And I put it in the back seat just in case I lost my nerve at the last minute. But I went to go pick her up and I didn't have a hijab on. And she just was so enraged, totally flew off the handle. And she told me that she was going to, that the next step for me would be to leave Islam, and that she would have me killed before I did that, because then now I was playing with her, soul, because she's the one who's going to get punished for eternity for raising a non-believing daughter, and she wouldn't let that happen. So she's going to make sure that I'm killed before I reach that point.
Yeah. So killing you would be justified in her.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. It would be justified because it would be saving me from leaving Islam, and also saving her from having to suffer the consequences of raising a daughter who would leave the religion. So it just made sense to her. And she was not, I did not ever feel that it was hyperbole, because I grew up, honor killings are a natural part of our culture. Like it happens all the time. It's in Canada, even we've had many examples of honor killings going on. But back in those days, before social media or anything, quite often what would happen is a girl would just disappear. And they'd say, oh, she's gone back to Pakistan, or she's gone back to Egypt, or she's gone back to whatever. And there's no way to verify that.
Right. And
so I would get told all the time, I'm just going to say that you're gone back to Egypt. Meanwhile, you're buried in the backyard. Like, if you don't listen, that's what's going to happen to you.
Oh, that's awful.
So, yeah. So I responded by saying, I would never leave Islam. I just don't want to wear the hijab. But she didn't believe me. And she said, no, one day you will. And so I'll have to make sure that you're killed before you do. And she was right. I did.
Right. It was great hearing you talk about finally getting into college or university, and education really is the cure.
Totally
to
agree.
Bullshit. And there's just so many stories of so many people just being cured from these destructive belief systems by just getting some education, and that's why I'm such a proponent of us spending as much money as possible, essentially, on education as a country.
Yeah, you just can't overemphasize how important critical thinking is, because that was the thing that was taken away from us. Like the curiosity that a young child has, where you keep on asking why, that's beaten out of you. You're taught to not question, and in fact to not even in your own mind, you can't even question, because that's the devil whispering in your ear.
Right.
Whenever you have any doubts.
So you had a daughter with this man, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And at some point, he had mentioned something about getting your daughter purified or cleaned up, and he was referring to genital mutilation.
Yeah. Yeah, that was another thing that motivated me to get away from him, because the response from my mother was, and I didn't know this at the time, so when he first mentioned it, I was petrified, because there's nothing I could have done to stop him. But my mom said, oh no, we can't do that when she's a newborn. We have to wait until she's a little bit older. She has to be, 6 years old or something. And then that's when we'll do it. So instantly in my head, I was like, well, I'm just going to have to make sure I get her out of here before she reaches that age. So
right.
I felt like I had, like it was such a weight off my shoulders to hear her say that, because then I knew that I had some time to get her out.
Yeah, I mean, a deadline had now been set. You had a certain amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
And like, Where would this procedure get done in Canada?
Well, I think that what would have happened, which is what generally happens, is that we would travel to Egypt
Right.
and get it done there and then come back home again. So it's very, very common in Egypt, especially where my family is from. It's somewhere in the 90 something percent. So it's very high amount of girls that suffer from it there.
Right.
It's not something that happened in my family, so I wasn't familiar with it, but it is very common there, and obviously it's something common to his family.
So you had every justification in the world to get out of this marriage and to escape, but it did take this, this aspect of female genital mutilation being threatened towards your daughter for you to finally say, okay, I have to do something because someone else is in danger.
Yeah, I quite often tell my daughter that she saved my life, because all of the things, like I knew he was a jihadi from Afghanistan, right? I didn't know specifically Al Qaeda or what their potential was, but I knew he was a bad guy. I knew that I didn't like this religion. I knew everything. But I didn't have the courage or the ability to leave. But once I had my little daughter in my arms and protecting her, I was able to get the strength to get out that I didn't have the strength to get myself out. So yeah, it just, that, instinct to protect was really strong.
Yeah, and I mean, it's so tough because if you were to have reported your husband to the authorities about the abuse, or did you at some point? Or
I did.
Yeah.
But then of course it ends up being even worse afterwards.
Right, because now
So,
you've kind of sold him to the authorities, and they throw you right back into the problem.
yeah. So when I was about 13 years old, I went to the authorities about my mom's husband. So my mom was a second wife to a man, second concurrent wife, to a man, and he used to beat us up. And so I went to the authorities to tell on him. And, it went all the way to court. And in the end, the judge said to me and to my family, every culture disciplines their children in different ways. And if this is how this culture chooses to discipline their child, then it's not our place to say otherwise. So after months of, working with child services and the police, and it was such a long, arduous process. And the whole time I really believed that they would get me out of that home. And in the end, they just threw me. I just stayed. And of course it was worse, because now you're going to be punished for basically for ratting out to the infidel, which is the worst betrayal, because, you've got your in group of Muslims and then the out group of non-Muslims. And I went to the out group asking for protection from my own ummah, which was, completely unacceptable. And so from that experience, I did not have a lot of faith that the authorities would help me.
Yeah, that singular judgment in the end basically said that it was okay for you to be going through this abuse. So how is this going to change when you're an abused wife going into the authorities and trying to tell them what's going on? Maybe they would throw your husband in the clink for 3 days and then let him out, and he's out again, and he's in your home. So I can totally understand why. Obviously, I don't know what it's like to be in that position, but I can totally understand why you wouldn't have seen that as a viable option. That's just, I feel so bad for what you've had to gone through, but I'm so happy you're doing what you're doing now, and I'm just really proud to be speaking with you today.
Thank you so much, Travis. That's exactly why I speak out now. It's because I want to help as many people that are currently in the same situation that I was in.
Right. So maybe take us to the day that you felt free of the abuse. Like, what happened that day, and did you have the bags packed, or what? Like,
Hmm.
what happened?
Well, there were. It was not a. It was not just a day. It was many days and many ups and downs and many back and forths. It was a very messy, tumultuous, scary time. But I'd say the most important day in all of this was when I had. So for reasons, maybe I'll just quickly tell you. So I ended up pregnant again, and I went for my first ultrasound, and I found out I was pregnant. And when I found out I was pregnant, I was just beside myself. I think I went a little insane. I was just
Right.
screaming and crying because I felt like, how am I ever going to survive with two kids? I was so angry at myself that I didn't leave when I could have left. I mean, I did, but I went back and forth and I was scared and whatever, but it was not a clean break. But anyway, in that process, I ended up getting pregnant again. I was so angry at myself. And then I went for the ultrasound and I found out that the baby didn't have a heartbeat. So
Right.
now I felt guilt because now I felt like I'm the reason why the baby is dead because I didn't want it. Meanwhile, when I thought I was pregnant, I had already made peace with it. I was like, well, that's it. We're just going to move to Peshawar in Afghanistan like he wants to. And I'm just going to be a jihadi wife. Like, that's it. I'm not going to be able to survive with two children. And so I accepted my fate very, very, despondently, but I accepted it. And then I found out there was no heartbeat. So instead of feeling at that point like, okay, so this is, I could have my freedom. Instead, I felt, oh my God, I can't believe I just killed my child. And so anyway, it was just a very emotionally difficult time.
Of course, because I mean,
But
it's like, you find out that the the pregnancy isn't going to move forward, and normally that's a pretty sad moment. But it's like, on a certain level, it's like part of your escape plan
and
might have been disrupted, and it's just an emotional roller coaster.
it was, and because I saw, so once I came out of the surgery, the nurse told me, you're going to need to stay with somebody to help you out with your baby for a few hours or something because you're going to be groggy from the general anesthetic. And so I felt sick and guilty and horrible about doing this, but I took that opportunity I saw in that situation an opportunity to say to him that I needed to stay with my mom for a week. I said, I need to stay with my mom for a week because they said the general anesthetic is going to take that long for me to get over it. And he said, yeah, sure, no problem. And so I took some clothes and I went to my mom's, and I also told my mom the same thing. I have to stay here for a week, knowing that that was my window. Like, now I have to do something.
So your mom didn't really know what you had planned.
Oh, no, no.
Okay.
She would support him as well.
Right.
So it was, I mean, I was doing divide and conquer with them too, but it was all very, it was just this big mess at the time.
Did you have any friends helping you, or were you alone?
No, I was already cut off. That's the first thing an abuser does is cut you off from everybody.
Right.
So once my mom went to work, because she used to be the head of the Islamic Studies department at the local Islamic school. So once she got up to go to work, I took my daughter, and I'd gone through the yellow pages and I found a lawyer that was nearby, and I got on the city bus, thinking now how ridiculous. I mean, I was covered head to toe in black. Even my eyes didn't even show. And I'm carrying my baby, and I walked into a lawyer's office, and I remember their reaction, and I remember thinking, why are they acting so weird? Because I didn't even realize
Yeah.
how strange it must have been. But I walked in there and I said, I need three things. I need full custody of my daughter, I need a divorce, and I need a restraining order. And I need them stat. And you can't contact me. You can't, I'm staying with my mom, but you can't phone me there, can't send me any letters there. Like, this is it. This is our only time that we can contact each other. So we have to get everything now. And she was like, don't worry about it. I got this. You're fine. You know, and she was very supportive. And I was totally freaked out. Like, I did not feel fine. I was scared that something was going to go wrong and she was going to need to contact me. But she was extremely kind. And, you know, she never even sent me a bill. I went and found her years later, but that's a different story. But, and then I went back home or back to my mom's house, and I just waited. Hopefully, you know, he would get served with the divorce papers. You know, I just hoped that things would go right.
Right.
And yeah.
So let's go back to that moment. So you walk into the lawyer's office, and there's a look on their face. Were they did they look terrified of what was walking towards them, or were they just like confused, or?
Yes. Yeah. I think it was like WTF.
Yeah. Like, what the fuck is this?
They were just like, what is happening? Why is this woman completely shrouded in black? I mean, I used to even wear black gloves.
Right.
Like not a single speck of skin was showing. So basically just this black ghost walking towards you with a baby in her arms.
And what were the adrenaline levels like? Because you were bringing others kind of from the outside into what was going on and the problems that were happening. I mean, your adrenaline must have been just through the roof.
Well, that was always my sin. My biggest sin was that I didn't have this hate for the non-believers that I was supposed to have. And I didn't have a disdain and a disgust that I was taught to have. It never worked with me. And it didn't work with me because I'm raised in this society. So the man that my mom married, she only married him when I was like 5 or 6 years old. So in the years before that, you know, my best friends were Chelsea and Lindsay, who lived a couple apartments down. And we used to play Barbies together all the time. And you know, I'd go to their birthday parties and I had a normal life. I'd ride a bike, I'd swim. And so when he came into our life and started saying all of this stuff is haram, all of this stuff is forbidden, you're not allowed to play with your friends anymore, got rid of all my Barbies, no more swimming, no more bike riding, no more birthdays, no more anything, no more music. He broke all of our records. I fought against him from the beginning. I never liked it. I never liked him. I never liked his stupid rules. I didn't like this book with all of this foreign stuff written on it, and I didn't understand a word of it. I didn't like any of it. And I resisted up until I was put in hijab and sent to an Islamic school. That's when I finally just like, there's no point. I mean, you're a child. How resisting isn't good. It's futile.
Right.
So my whole life, my mom's biggest problem with me was that she's like, you love the kuffar, you just love them. And I'm like, yeah, because they're nice to me. Right. You know what I mean? But yeah, that was a thing.
And they're supposed to be put to death, right?
Yeah. So it was one of the things. So when I wasn't going to Islamic schools, I had one of my very good friends was Tiffany, and she would make me sit down and promise that, well, not promise, but instruct me that when the caliphate rises and we all go to fight, I have to be willing to kill the non-believers. And she would specifically mention my friend to make sure that I would admit to be willing to kill her.
Right.
So that's what your allegiance, your loyalty is always to your tribe, is to your ummah. Right. And yeah, so going to the lawyer would have been a betrayal from my mom's perspective. But for me, I didn't have that sense of that I was, like, I always was okay with that. I was always okay with non-Muslims. But it was, the scariest thing for me was just getting home before my mom got home. I wasn't familiar with the bus system and everything, and I was just too scared that I would get home late and that she'd be like, "Where were you?" And the other thing that really scared me was that something would go wrong and that he wouldn't be served with the papers or something like that.
Or, I mean, this must have gone through your mind that he may have been served with the papers and been enraged to a level that you haven't even seen before. And
that's exactly what happened.
Did you ever fear for your... Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly what happened, which is why the restraining order was the third item that I asked for, because I suspected that's what was going to happen. And boy, did that happen.
Yeah.
And it was so scary that I didn't leave the house for months, because the restraining order only restricts him from, 150 feet or whatever it is from your place of where you work or where you live or where you go to school or whatever. And since I didn't do any of those things, all I did was live. He just wasn't allowed 150 feet near the apartment building, but he could potentially be anywhere. I could leave the house and bump into him anywhere. And he had already told me in detail what he was going to do to me if he ever saw me. So I was petrified of leaving the house. And it wasn't until CSIS contacted me with, they had a picture of him behind bars in Egypt. And they said, "Is this him?" And I confirmed it was him. And that was the day that I applied to go to university. And that's the day that I started to look for housing for me and my daughter to get away from living with my mom as well.
Right. So seeing him behind bars, you now know he's behind bars and he's not getting out for a long time, and you can be rest assured that he's not going to harm you. Do you think sometimes that somehow he might be trying to get even with you from inside jail in some way, or do you protect? Do you have a certain level of protection for where you live and just so it's not easy for people to find you?
Yeah, absolutely. My daughter and I both changed our names right away, and we left the city and even the country for a while. So I was afraid of that for a long time, because I didn't know. I mean, even though he was sentenced to 15 years, I didn't know if he would actually serve the 15 years.
Right.
But because of the way I've learned more, I didn't know all of this about Egypt and their system, but they really have a zero tolerance policy towards terrorists. And he's lucky to even have been kept alive. Normally they would just have killed him. But if his case wasn't so high profile and, FBI were involved and everything, so they couldn't easily just kill him. So that's the only reason why he was alive. But I'm pretty sure they never would have let him out. So I don't know if he's still in there or if he survived or what.
Right. So now you're on to better times. You get to go to university.
Mm-hmm.
What was your course load like? What did you sign up for?
I was like a crazy person, because in my head, I wanted to get my degree and get a decent job and be a role model for my daughter before she was old enough to be able to recognize that I was a mess and that we were living in government housing.
Right.
So I took the maximum course load all the time throughout the summer, and I just killed myself. I just did it. And my aim was for her because in my own mind, I was like, well, I think about 5 or 6 years old is when your memories start to solidify. So I'm going to try and aim for that age. And I succeeded, thankfully. And now when I talk to her about it, she has vague memories of the time before that, but she doesn't know. Like, she'll say things like, "Oh yeah, I remember going to the McDonald's play place. We used to go there all the time." And I'm like, "Yeah, because it was free."
Yeah.
And she'd be like, "Oh, and you never wanted anything. Like, you'd get me fries or an ice cream or something, but I remember you never ate." And I'm like, "That's because we didn't have money." So I'm pretty proud of how successful I was at keeping all that from her. And, now she knows everything because she's 21. So she's read my the first draft of my memoir, and And so, yeah, there's no more secrets. But for a very long time, I didn't want her to know that her dad was a jihadi because I didn't want her to connect with that. You know what I mean? I
Right.
didn't want her to feel like, holy shit, half my DNA is that of a murderer. So you don't want her to, once she was old enough and she's already, you know, a full, complete, solid, confident, amazing young woman, then it was safe to let her know all of the details. She had a sense that he was a bad man and he went to prison and things like that. But I only answered the questions truthfully. I didn't add any extra information.
Right. And what about so socially, you start going to university. You're wearing like, how did you? What kind of outfits did you wear to start out with?
Yeah, so
Like,
that was also a slow unraveling. So I didn't take off niqab right away, but
right.
I did have it off before I started going to university. But I was still wearing so I was only showing my face and hands. So went back to the way I was before I married him. And in university, it was my friends there that kind of encouraged me, like, hey, let's go shopping for jeans,
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
let's do your hair, let's do your makeup, let's pluck your eyebrows. And then
Yeah.
they just sort of got me, into helped me through the transition.
Yeah. And are you still friends with those people? Do you still stay
Yes.
connected? Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So they helped you out a lot with the social aspect of essentially coming out of this prison and dungeon that you've been living in for so long.
Yeah, and more than they knew too. Like they didn't realize it. We were all like, in our 20s and young, and they didn't realize, and I didn't realize what a huge impact they were making on my life. I mean, one of my friends, Tasha, at one point said to me, she was dropping me off and I was getting out of the car, and she just almost flippantly said to me, your mom is just a woman. She's just a woman, and she's just as flawed as any other human being. And it was such a huge moment for me because I'd been so scared of her for so long, and for her to identify, like, she's just a person that makes mistakes, and she's not like this all powerful anything.
Yeah.
It was such a huge moment for me, and it really continued. That thought just kept on coming back into my head. Anytime I get scared of my mom, I'd think, like, she's just a woman, she's just a person. And I told Tasha years later, like, you have no idea how much saying that one statement to me just changed my life.
Yeah, it's amazing when we demonize, or people become demonized in our minds, they almost take on this godlike
Yeah.
power figure to them, and this almost inconquerable. And then when someone from the outside just looks in and be like, what are you so worried about? What are you afraid
Yeah.
of? This is just another person.
Yeah.
Like if they're doing all this stuff to you, or doing whatever, fuck them and move on, right? And sometimes it takes that outside perspective to really put things into reality for us.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, friends are so important when it comes to that.
Hmm.
And how about so maybe take us to a little bit. Did you start noticing people you were maybe interested relationship wise or sexually at some point? How early did that start happening, or did it ever happen?
Yeah, that started, it started pretty early on, but I was not into it. Like, I was very scared of men. I was very scared of getting into another relationship. I just didn't want it. I was not, it all, I felt like I had just gotten my freedom, and getting in a relationship with somebody else was, I felt, the worst possible thing I could do. So I fought it for a while, but eventually I met a man that made me feel like I was worried that I may not meet somebody like him ever again. So that's why I gave him a chance. And
Right.
I'm glad I did, because we've been married for just over 10 years now. So
That's
it worked
awesome.
out.
That's awesome to
Yeah.
hear.
Hmm.
Um, there's always light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, yeah. That's my main message, Travis. That's what I try to tell because it's really, really such a dark tunnel. I mean, it's so lonely. It's so scary. I mean, you have your whole life mapped out for you. You know, everything is so clear and easy when you're a Muslim because there's always right and wrong and there's a rule for everything. I mean, if you Google it, it's insanity the kinds of questions people ask the sheikhs. Like, am I allowed to play this video game? Like everything, there's always, it's so specific. There's always a right and wrong answer. So you never really think. You never have to think. And when you get that taken away from you, and all of a sudden your life has no purpose, you don't know the difference between right and wrong, you don't know anything because everything that you knew was a lie. And dealing with that is just you know, I cannot express to you how scary that is. But talking to people who are going through that right now and just trying to get them to see, like you said, that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Like just pay attention to the little blip, far out there and just strive for it and know that one day you will rebuild yourself brick by brick and you will be in the light.
Amazing. Let's transition into talking about live events.
Mm-hmm.
So Pangburn Philosophy, we just announced the Fleeing Fundamentalism tour, and
Yeah.
this is a 3-woman tour. Yasmine Mohammed, of course, Megan Phelps Roper from the very infamous Westboro Baptist Church.
Mm-hmm.
Those of you would think of Shirley Phelps is her mother.
Mm-hmm.
These were the people very famous for carrying around the God Hates Fags signs and picketing the funerals of dead soldiers and basically any kind of dead celebrity. So very very hateful group, but Megan was able to escape. So she will be on stage with Yasmine and also, is it Fremet or Fremet?
I think it's Fremit.
Yeah, Fremet Goldberger, and she's an ex-Hasidic Jew. And so they're all going to be discussing their experiences on breaking the chains of dangerous belief systems. And what are you looking forward to about that, Yasmin?
I am looking forward to drawing the parallels between the experiences that we all share and the back to that point again of the light at the end of the tunnel. Like no matter how difficult of a situation you're in, you can persevere. So we have had very different backgrounds in some ways and also very similar backgrounds in some ways. And I think all three of us have similar personality traits too, and that we're all skeptics and we continue to question. Like we were never the good girls. We were always the ones that were causing trouble and getting in trouble. And so I'm just looking forward to, I mean, really, Islam is given such an exceptional place in the discourse these days, and people are very, comfortable talking about, let's say, the homophobia in Christianity or the homophobia in, any other ideologies that are homophobic or sexist or racist or et cetera, et cetera. But when it comes to speaking about those same dangerous things in Islam, people clam up. And so I want people to be able to see that it is just the same, that when you speak about the bad ideas in any of these ideologies, Islam can be spoken about as well. It also has many bad ideas that need to be pointed out in the same way.
Yeah, I mean, this very strange term, Islamophobia,
Mm-hmm.
came out of the woodworks, and it was very much created by the extreme left. And this is a problem. Like, and then I always ask people who spout this term, Islamophobia, are you phobic towards people who want to kill others who don't believe the same thing as them? Well, yeah, most people are phobic of that. So it's like, yeah, these terms make it as if like we should be, you know, apologist walking around for Islam and saying, well, it's their culture, let them do what they want. It's like, no, if there's a bad idea that's having people getting executed because they happen to, be attracted to someone of the same sex, I'm going to call that thing out, and I'm going to go to war with that idea. I'm not going to go to war with the people. I'm going to go to war with the idea.
Exactly. And they just are unwilling. They just shut their brains off when it comes to Islam. So if you talk about the bad idea all by itself, then they're like, oh yeah, of course, that's horrible, that's horrible. But then you say a Muslim person believes that, then that's when things change.
Right.
And I mean, it's really shocking to see. I had an argument with a gay guy recently that was still trying to say that American conservatives, sorry.
No worries.
He was saying that American conservatives are the absolute worst enemy of the LGBT community right now because of the fact that they ignored AIDS and they allowed that plague to continue, turning a blind eye. And I said, okay, that was atrocious.
Yeah.
However, can we talk about the current plague that is happening? Can we talk about the 15 countries that will sentence you to death for being gay?
Yeah.
That's a current plague that you are turning a blind eye to.
Yeah, these are places you can't even go as a gay man or gay woman and survive and be who you want to be without getting actually killed.
Yeah. Yeah. Now imagine being born and raised in that society. Nobody is saying that things are perfect in America, right? But at least you're working in the right direction. At least there are laws to protect people. There aren't laws saying if you're gay, you're to be killed. There's a very big difference between your average assholes that are going to be homophobic to you and actual laws. You know what I mean? But he's unwilling to admit that because those laws are in Islamic countries. He'll start talking again, if we're going to talk about anything or anyone being bad, it has to be a white Christian. But nobody else can say or do or think bad things. Everybody else is perfectly fine because that would be racist.
Well, and I always get too, once I boil all that down for people who spout Islamophobia, then at the end they get frustrated because there's nowhere for them to go logically, and then they say, well, why do you even care, Travis? It's happening on the other side of the world. Whoa. Well, I happen to fucking care about other people.
Ouch.
And when I wake up every morning, I think about children who are being genitally mutilated, and I want to help them and save them, and I want to help save people who are being killed, and this is just you're acting like a normal human being. Yeah, this is part of my moral foundation, and I can't get away from it. So that's why I care about other people. I don't just care about the things that are gonna better my life. Better my life from like a economic standpoint or from whatever. I get a lot of pleasure out of helping people, and my pleasure drive allows me to do that. So yeah.
And what a disgusting question for them to ask too. Like anybody would have said during apartheid, anybody would have said, why do you care about those black people in South Africa? Why do you care, Travis?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's the same. Yeah, this is the same shit. It happens all the time. I am very much going to war with anyone who chooses to circumcise their boys, because there's no scientific reason or medically necessary reason to do it in 99.9% of the cases, and this is something I talk about lots, and then people come, oh, you're not going to tell me what I do with my son when he's born, and I'm going to do it just because I can, and I'm like, whoa, there's a huge misstep in cognition here.
Yes, there is. I mean, those same people will be just disgusted at the fact that a girl could be, that she would be genitally mutilated. But then you say, okay, well, why is it okay to do it to a boy? And they'll give you all of these excuses that there are the exact same
Yeah.
excuses
Yeah.
that the FGM supporters give.
Yeah.
I mean, they say it's for cleanliness. Well, no, it's fucking not.
No, it's
You
not.
know?
Yeah.
And well, there's, whatever reason they come up with. I'm like, you guys sound exactly the same.
You wouldn't believe. So I do these I structure these comments on my Facebook fan page to provoke conversation about these things, and we did I did a post on circumcision, and we had all of these mothers, this was shocking. We had all of these mothers coming on, or professed mothers, saying that the reason why I circumcised my son is because I do not like performing oral sex
What?
on a uncircumcised penis. And
Wow.
think of that level of
Fucked
what's
upness.
going on. Yeah, and like you the reason you're giving is something to do with your own sexual preference.
Correct. And
Like,
that is and when I say they sound exactly the same, so what the other people will tell you on the female genital mutilation side is they don't want to have to be bothered to bring her to orgasm. So it
right.
hits his sexual preference too.
Wow. Yeah, there's a lot that needs to be questioned in this world, and I'm so glad you're out there doing the hard work.
I'm so
And
glad you're out there doing the hard work. You're doing a lot more than me.
yeah,
I'm really I'm really grateful to be part of the Pangburn philosophy family. I think that you guys are doing amazing work, and I'm so honored to be a part of it.
awesome. Well, thank you for saying that. Last thing, so when you look at your life now, are you currently living your dream, or what is the next step for you? What are your next goals?
I am currently living the dream, but my next goal right now is I'm going to sound a bit like Sam Harris when I'm pushing the mindfulness stuff, but it really is just to heal because writing my book and doing all of this work has unearthed a lot of stuff that I had kept hidden, buried, it's just been put away for so many years. And, now that's all been disrupted and all of these thoughts and feelings and fears and all that stuff is all coming to the surface. So it's been a trying couple of years, and now I'm just trying to focus on working on my mental health, which is something that I never really bothered with before. I just kept plowing through. To me, it was about, I have to pay my tuition, I have to pay rent, I have to, get through this, that, and the other thing. And it was all very like just things about my physical world. But now I need to
Yeah.
just make sure that I take care of myself internally.
Yeah, so I mean, your life was so much about logistics, and then
Hmm.
you finally had an opportunity to look at the big picture, and I can definitely relate to that. Are you do you suffer from depression?
Yes, very
Yeah,
much so. It's terrifying when I feel it coming on because I'm like, here we go again.
yeah,
It mostly, it's really just that cycle that I've been living with for a very long time and just been in denial. So now I'm just finally in safe enough of a place and feeling strong enough to finally stop and deal with all of these things as opposed to just, taking some pills and getting over it. You know
yeah.
what I mean?
Well, I can relate.
Hmm.
I've been struggling with depression for a long time, and it is it's almost an indefinable thing,
Yeah.
undefinable thing. But yeah, it's a constant. You gotta constantly work at it, and it's something that just becomes a part of your life. And I've reached a point where I've gotten to a place where I can at least live without it disrupting my life too much, and I think that's the best that some of us can do with it, and that doesn't make us, less powerful in what we can do for the world. It just, we sometimes have to just work a little bit harder.
That's my hope, that I want to get to where you are right now. So that's my current
Well,
project.
lean on me. I've been through. Yeah, one of these times I'm going to do a podcast on what I've been through with my depression and anxiety, panic disorder,
Yeah.
all this stuff. One day I'll talk about that. But
I hope you do. I hope you do, because I think that we don't talk about it enough, and then we don't realize until you mention it, you don't realize how many people are also going through the same torture, but we're all quietly going about our own personal tortures. Like we should, I'm glad that now people are more willing to talk about it and share their ideas and what they've been through, because it makes you feel less alone, and it makes it less scary to know that other people have been through it and that they are coming out the other side.
right, yeah, it was interesting. I was at a party with probably, I would say, 30 people about a year and a half ago, and I just was the voice that came out with it and said, yeah, because we got on to some medical stuff and we were talking about um, depression and other things, and I said, yeah, I've suffered from it for this many years, and then people started saying 4 years over here, and then someone
Oh,
over here said 10 years, and then I was like, I just said show of hands, and I put up my
wow.
hand, and everyone minus two people, and there was like around this specific table we were sitting at, there was about 12 people, and there was 10 people with their hands up, and yeah, it's true. It's like this needs to become almost normalized, because it is something that it's like you're not going to fight it like a disease
No,
necessarily. It's more something that is, at least for me, is always going to be there. It's just you
manage it.
you manage it, and you find ways to make it a part of your life, and
Hmm.
that's what I've been able to do. But it's not a perfect battle, and
Hmm.
things can always go south. But that's also part of understanding that this is not your fault that you're feeling this way. It's just it happens to be part of your chemistry,
Hmm.
and yeah, like you said, it's about managing it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Well, I mean, that's a great goal to have, and I'm so happy where you are. You seem like you're very happy in your life right now, and that means a lot to hear. So,
Yeah, I am. I'm very grateful, very, very grateful that a million different things could have gone in a million different directions. So I'm really very, very grateful that things turned out the way they did.
all right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, Yasmine. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me, Travis.
Yeah, and always lean on me if you have any questions or need any help.
You got it. Thank
All
you.
right, everyone, thank you so much for tuning into the Pangburn Philosophy Podcast. Let art and science inspire.